This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada has been supporting Canadian small business retailers for 25 years. With their up and running program, you can access eBay's 180 plus million buyers in 190 countries around the world. With up and running, there are no listing fees on up to 200 listings per month, and you only pay fees when you sell. As part of the eBay community, you get real-time advice and inspiration and access to powerful selling tools and insights. Go to ebay.ca/up and running, stay local, and sell global.
Welcome to Canada's podcast, the number one podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs.
Hi, welcome to Canada's podcast. I'm your host, Celine Williams, and I'm here today with Suzie Yorke, who's the CEO and founder of Love Good Fats, a company that's on a mission to change how North Americans eat. Love Good Fats is currently available at over 18,000 stores, including most natural food stores, and is the fastest growing food startup in Canada. Thanks for being here, Suzie. I'm really excited to talk to you.
It's, wonderful, and thank you, Celine, for having me. So I kind of quickly had, through networking, just classic networking, I have an idea, what do you think? Everyone wanted to meet me. I probably had 200 people say yes. So that was very different world for me, where when you have a job, I was, as a VP, I was maybe networking 1 or twice a year for some lunches and stuff. Now I suddenly was, meeting 2 people a day sometimes and saying, I have this idea. What do you think? Can you help me with this? So it was a very different world, and I kind of realized how everyone was so generous. And I wind up quickly finding, like the team that wanted to either be on the board or be an advisor and help with, little kind of $10,000 here and there to kind of say, I'll put a little bit of money behind so you can start. So it went from, part-time, half at first was, like on my weekends and weeknights. And then I went part-time, just kind of doing this while I'm still trying to pay bills, because I was a single mom back then. And I had one daughter going into university and one son still has to, get through school. And so it went from, call it March 2016, and we shipped our first case in September 17. So that was actually 8 months longer than it could have been, just because the first production entirely failed. So we could have, so I had to, write off $80,000 of packaging, garbage. So I raised money, and I borrowed money from my mortgage and all my savings, and boom, 80,000 was gone because the first production that we did in April 2017 failed. So we kind of had to delay the launch, but essentially, you can, so the summer of 16 was doing the concept work. So one research after another. I think I paid for 3 rounds of research, but given this is my job, instead of hiring an agency or some consultants, I'm able to do research for $800 per wave of research and my time, which is kind of nothing versus a lot of other startups. Kind of like, well, I don't, how do I get consumer research? How do I write the concept? How do I come up with packaging? I happen to be able to do all that kind of for very low cost. So you do that first. Then I was getting better and tighter in the concepts. I kept updating my PowerPoint, getting more and more data. What was happening in parallel is butter and meat and milk was on the front page of Time magazine, front page of Fortune magazine, front page of Forbes. Fats are back, saturated fats are good, cardiovascular is no longer, disease is no longer linked to fats, boom, boom, boom. So every month there was new information that fats were good. So I kept updating my PowerPoint. One of my first board members got me, a few retailer meetings. So even though it was really early, we had a chance to fly and meet a few retailers and get their input, which usually doesn't happen. We kind of had top to tops, really early on. So, it was a checklist. And I think, of the 200 or so people I met early on, there was 199 that have said wow, this is a big idea. And the name changed, it was Love Fats, and then Suzie's Good Fats, and then the Good Fat Company. We're just kind of in an exploration mode, like exploring the logo, the name, the trademarks, but I was getting check marks throughout. And you know, and you kind of have to work through the consumer research data, Canada and US, and the feedback you're getting from some you know, some established kind of experts. And when you kind of, you know, get a lot of similar feedback, you kind of stay the course. Plus, you know, I have my background. So we kind of did I did all of that stuff initially, and then had a big production fail. And then kind of said, oh, you know, the company would have shut down if I hadn't found another co-packer. But I just got really lucky, and that co-packer fail led to finding a bigger co-packer who actually was closer to home in market instead of in Quebec. And they were able to make an even better bar than we would have made because they had different equipment. So, you know, like, hallelujah, like the, you know, kind of the journey, I got really kind of lucky there with that fail, but wind up in a better place. And then the other big kind of fork in the road was the keto trend, which was really, you know, last 20 years, kind of the same. Like a lot of, you know, healthcare professionals knew obviously about the ketogenic diet, and it kind of had a lot of benefits to treating certain, you know, children epilepsy and certain health issues. But it was, you know, that kind of niche, like undercurrent. And then suddenly, boom, you know, Nina's book comes out, front page of all the news, more and more is featuring fats. And then that just kind of got low carb and keto through the roof again. And I just had, you know, my bars on the shelves since September 17. And by May 2018, keto was the #1 Google diet out there. So it was just, you know, the right product with the right partner and the right category, consumer behavioral trends kind of just uplifted the brand. And that's a gift, right? Like if you're with the right brand idea at the right time, you can kind of take off. You could have a phenomenal brand idea, but if your timing is a bit off, you're often too early, then you don't get that benefit. But I kind of, you know, I got kind of lucky twice, and it's all kind of, it's helped kind of fuel where we are today.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting how, looking back, you know, the quote failure of the co-packing in the moment, I'm sure felt like a lot. I mean, it's a huge problem to deal with. And then looking back, you're able to go, wow, actually, that was a gift, because look what I got instead of what I thought I wanted.
Yeah, I was in shock. And I think most of the kind of the team around me kind of thought like, right? Like one of hundreds of thousands of ideas that just, you know, it's kind of like with startups, right? How many food startups kind of make it on the shelf in the US and stay there? Like, you know, first, you're already in a fraction of this food startups will ever be able to do that. And then second, okay, well, you know, that was a nice idea, but kind of dead on, can't get the bars made. And, you know, it just, when looking back now, we were able in 11 weeks, I was able to find another co-packer, scrap the packaging, reorder, re-upload, get it up printed again in Korea, get it shipped back, and get kind of the team on the line for 3 days trying to make them. You know, if we've done a lot of things fast in the last 2.5 years, but nothing that fast. So, you know, I was really scared inside, I think, but I was just so focused on, like, because the reality is I would have had to go back to my day job of consulting, which I really didn't want to do, or finding another VP job. I really didn't want to do that at that, you know, at that age and time in my career. But I think I didn't know what I didn't know. I wasn't an entrepreneur that kind of maybe had 10 false starts, right? I just was naively kind of, I mean, I got a problem to solve. I'm an engineer. I got to find another co-packer. And I had 30 that said, no, 30 times. And I had one that said, you know, there's not one bar we've not been able to make in our 50 years history. So bring it on. And that was game changer.
That's incredible. You said something that I want to touch on in there, which was that that there was in essence, you were a first-time entrepreneur who hadn't had all those failures, who was
Mm-hmm.
kind of naively saying like, well, I'm just going to keep going, right? I have a problem to
Yep.
solve, but it's that
Yep.
first-time entrepreneur in engineering
Yep.
background. And I wonder, there's so much grace and blessing in something
Yep.
like that. But I wonder, from someone who comes from a corporate background, um, were there also challenges inside of that show up because how you are taught to think or how you think things should work aren't
Yeah.
necessarily what's happening?
Yeah. There's massive, massive challenges. And I think I'm a bit of the exception where 25-year corporate veteran at age 50, single mom with not that much money in the bank, relatively speaking, says, "Oh, I'm going to start my own food company." Like, it, there are some, but it's kind of the exception, because But the difference, I think, with me is, for anyone who's kind of like worked with me through my careers, I've always kind of been a little bit different. Like, in terms of, I was more of a change agent. So after the first 10 years of P&G and Heinz and Frito-Lay, and even in those three roles, I was kind of the change agent of, like, okay, PepsiCo needed Doritos and Tostitos, like, needed kind of a change agent to come in to kind of to fix, the brands weren't growing or weren't introduced. Then Heinz ketchup had been declining for 10 years, recruiter calls. Then Weight Watchers had been declining for 10 years, recruiter calls. So I kind of had defined myself as the change agent who, long time respectable brands are declining, not growing, not hitting target, call me. And that, combined with, I think, what later got coined as an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then I think it was later, and like, oh, you're probably checking that box of an entrepreneur. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good way to summarize my, kind of. So I had kind of that innate, at age 15, I wanted to start my own company. It just took me 35 years. So I kind of had a bit of the behaviors, and I think the best way to think about it is, if you are that change agent entrepreneur, you probably don't quite fit in the 50-year mold of just a bigger packaged goods. The benefit, though, is, had I started a food brand in my 20s or 30s, it wouldn't have got this big this fast, right? Because you kind of have to know positioning, product, price, value, and then awareness and trial plans and then retailers, distributor networks, like, planning, innovation. You kind of have to know that. And I was very fortunate too with networking, is, even though I kind of had neglected networking over the last 20 years, I had, my LinkedIn up, and I had 400 contacts, and I don't even know if I checked it once a week, to now I have 10,000 of them on it all day. And I still think I'm nowhere doing close enough to what I should be doing. But I was able to through networking, I'm just like, here's my idea, can you help me? Basically have now thousands of people that have reached out and contributed to help. So sometimes when you're younger, like there's a million reasons why none of this would have worked had I tried in my 20s or 30s. Plus, I was too scared back then, right? I was like, I don't have money, I don't have an idea, I'm not really an entrepreneur. I got bills to pay. And then I had, young kids. So I had all the reasons why, nope, can't be an entrepreneur earlier on. And then I would look around, and there's all these successful, and especially now, these young startups. But for me, it was like, nope, that's not me, right? Like I'm not, so it wasn't in my blood as there's some 15-year-olds now that I'm seeing on my son's age that are starting stuff. That wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of worked out for the right combination of factors. It worked out that I was able to come up with a brand and have a strong enough brand proposition and a community support to be able to launch pretty fast and grow crazy fast after that.
Absolutely. You know, I think we live in a time right now where we glorify entrepreneurs and we don't talk about the challenges, and we don't talk about, you know, nothing is certain, and I say this, but there's more safety in working for someone else than there is in starting your own thing at the
Mhm.
beginning until you know if it's going to work. And so I think we are seeing a lot of like 15-year-olds now, for example, who are thinking that way. And thankfully, they're young enough to be resilient and not have it,
Mhm.
ruin their lives forever, if that's even a
Yeah.
thing. But like, I think there's something to be said for, we do glorify entrepreneurship a lot more now than we used to. And so 15-year-olds see it as a real option, whereas, when you were 15, when I was 15, we might have been interested in it, but that's not what people were. People were
No.
like, go get a job. You get a job and you
Yeah.
do this safe thing.
And it was the exception that in her DNA, like I remember I was at McGill and one of my good friends, her husband is like this, in his DNA as an entrepreneur. Like by the time he's at university, it was his third company. Now I think he's had 30. And it was all in the technical, because I was in engineering on the technical software back then. But like literally, like only kind of those. I remember I was at P&G and two guys left and they both started their company. And I was like, oh, like everyone else was also, wow, right? Like that was the exception.
Yeah.
And I think we glorify entrepreneurs, and there's a whole kind of generation that merely is saying, working for somebody is kind of like, kind of not success. But we'll kind of see how like there's such big pros and cons. I think Michelle Obama that I saw speak, basically one of her big themes when she came to Toronto was, you got to do the work.
Yeah.
Right? Like you put in 10 years of doing the work, right? There's no shortcut. If you want to have a successful company, do the work. And she was a little bit kind of hard on that, like, I think I will instantly kind of be successful. And the reality is, you have a lot of people that seemingly, go on Instagram, have 1 million followers, are suddenly influencers and supposedly making a lot of money. I know that's now changing, but we have a generation that it seemed that you could do something on your own and get, the quick hits. But the norm, whether it's a food startup and you have all the, the fintech and the digital and software, like you see the young guy that is suddenly the multimillionaire because he came up with whatever the next, Pinterest and Twitter and this and that. So you kind of have a generation that's saying, wow, like you can go from zero to something. But for the majority, you need to put in the hard work. And for every kind of food product that's on a shelf in some large grocery stores in Canada and stays on the shelf, there's thousands that have failed and will continue to fail and not kind of make it even for the founder to pay their bills, right? It's a really tough, high fail rate. Big CPG has an 80% fail rate on innovation. Natural products has 96% fail rate, according to the Natural Product Expo research of 5-year trends on brands and innovation launched. So that's a big fail rate. So you hear about the Elon Musk and he epitomizes the entrepreneur, God. Like, my goodness, not only did he start one company, he has like 4, and they're all like game changers. So that it's great that you can kind of look up and dream that way, but you have to put in the work. And you might be a lucky 17-year-old that has this, techie next Twitter or whatever, and you'll make it really big. But the majority, and especially in food, where you gotta get something on the shelf, into a basket, paid with the wallet, and into a belly and consumed again and again and again, it's a hard work.
This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada is powering Canadian small businesses. Go to ebay.ca/up and running to open your new global e-commerce business.
I think it's really important to actually, so I think this is a really important conversation to have because you had, as you acknowledged, your growth, you had a fairly fast rise to being the fastest growing food startup in Canada, right? It was a shorter time frame than a lot of people have
Yep.
had. And yet inside of that, you have talked about, failures with the packaging, things that have held you back, having to
Yep.
rebrand it a few times. You've changed the name of the company. You've pivoted. I mean, I hate the term pivoted, but you've adapted, right?
Yep.
Even inside of that. And yes, you are very successful and you have this wonderful brand behind you, but it wasn't just like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to jump in and it's all going to work. And I think we look at people like Elon Musk, who is an exception and doesn't talk a lot about his failures and go, well, that's the way it is. And I think what you're talking about is and I get it was faster than for what it was for a lot of people because of your experience, but that's much more realistic. And it's important to talk about that so people don't only see the exceptions and think either there's something wrong with them because they're not doing it that way, or that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yep. And the majority, I'm starting to do a little bit more interviews and opening up a little bit of time, but I know the impression of people who've heard of my brand and the story, and, we've gotten a few awards, and the first impressions are, oh, wow, it's all kind of like, a bed of roses. And it's like, I changed the formula like 6 times. We kind of nearly went sideways here. We had this other issue there. Of course, we had the first big fail of the production and the product. And we just did it kind of so quickly. And I think, I was surrounded by kind of the right folks, and with my background from the brand marketing perspective, I was able to kind of make big decisions really fast. But if you make them wrong, they're costly. And when for perspective in food in Canada, I had the opportunity to be in Arlene Dickinson's incubator. I think it was cohort 4. So I had an opportunity to be with 16 other CEOs who had applied and had their ideas, and I think now she's had 12 cohorts. So that incubator is really the only one in Canada that's is really designed to help food startups. So it's amazing. It's in Calgary, so I had to fly back and forth to Calgary. So I had to have enough money to do that and learn. But when she accepted me in the program, I had 0 sales. So that was a gift, right? Like, okay, you're accepted in the program and you've not even sold 1 box. But a lot of the startups can be, you get to $1 million and that's a milestone. We even celebrated when we got to $1 million on Instagram and Facebook. And then you get to 2 million in food in Canada, and then you start smiling because you're nearly at the minimum threshold, right? That would be like 20 million in the US, and 20 million in the US is a pretty big, important milestone, because then all the VCs that fund you, that can fund you, know you're not just kind of, camouflaging that there's consumer demand. Like at 20 million, you're in the US, you start. So 2 million in Canada starts being kind of like serious, right? Like you still can only afford 2 to 3 employees, but still, right? So the majority of the startups kind of get stuck between, $1 million and 2 million. And what you want to do is, in food, if you're able to get to 5 and 10, wow, right? Like you have potential for growth, because now that starts being meaningful in the startup world. But even like there's big CPG brands that are not, more than 10, like depending the consumer needs. So, and many startups will take 10 years to get to 2, 3 million. And they're trying to kind of figure out, how do I then get to the 10 million plateau? So it's kind of all, connected of your positioning, your product, your price value. And we happen to kind of, blow by 1 million, blow by 10 million really, really fast, because there was so much demand for a low sugar, high fat, delicious bar. Like our bar tastes like no other bar like there, no other protein bar tastes like this, no other sugar bar even tastes like this, right? There's all these dates bars and agave bars and, natural, sugar bars, carbs bars, like they're like chocolate bars to your liver. But we have a, barely any sugar 1 to 2 gram bar that tastes absolutely insanely delicious. So like people will take one bite, they're like, whoa, wait a minute. And it's only 1 to 2 gram of sugar. So we kind of were riding a big trend, and had a unique product. So we were able to kind of grow really, really quick, but you still have to kind of recognize that for a lot of startups, you're trying to get to 2 million and every single penny matters because you don't have that many funds and it's expensive, so it's all kind of connected to, how big is your idea and how do you get from below kind of thresholds to above. So then you can kind of get bigger and bigger.
So I want to ask this question because we have some listeners who have companies, whether it's, food goods or not, who would be at a point where they're looking for investors, whether it's, VCs or otherwise. What has your experience been with that? And or would you have any advice for anyone who's at the point where they're starting to think about that?
Yeah, the advice that was given to me, and then I've lived it through in the last 3 years, is go with you really only have angels up front, right? So I actually had invitations and met Ps and VCs as kind of a gift, like a favor, right? Like they'll spend half an hour to give me some advice, but the advice was go angel. And really, angels is called friend and family, but I had no friends and no family that had money, that's for sure. So it is kind of through networking, and you really have to start with angel investors, and you have to start with, find kind of a couple folks that will be on your board and kind of help so it's not just you have a couple of experts that will play a role of saying, I'm kind of a more seasoned executive and I support this idea too. And then they'll help open doors. But in the end, it's your idea, but you want to have a couple of kind of strong, seasoned, recognized experts to support your idea, and then get angel. And with angel, you need, your story, your little PowerPoint, and you just need to kind of tell your story and what are your wins and what do you think you're going to do. And then as you start selling, how are you doing and why do you think you can do more, and just really sweat it out. I was fortunate enough to be on the District Ventures incubator. So that's one gift to Canada that is funding startups. So I would for sure, Google all of the startups now. I think there's Startup Canada also. There's Mars, but I don't think Mars has programs. But I would Google and ask everybody what are all the startups in Canada funding options. But the majority, you need, $500,000, you need an idea, you need to have something, but just try, all of those. And in parallel, you're working angel investors. So if you can get, 150,000 with Startup Canada or with, a little contest, apply to all of them, because you'll learn and you'll kind of figure out the network. And that's kind of what you do the first couple of years. Because we got so big quickly, we were able to then get some VCs interested. At first they said, no. I think one of the VCs, I had calls with them when I had an idea on paper and it was great, keep it up, but no, right? So, and then when you get bigger, you can kind of get them kind of being interested in giving you term sheets. But it really is tough in Canada. The US investors have a hard time recognizing your results in Canada for what they are. So, we have numbers in Canada that are through the roof, and US VCs looking at them can't even make sense of the math because the velocities are so strong. They're like, no, that's not really possible. And I was like, yeah, it is. Here's the data, right? Just look at the Loblaws data, Costco data. Here it is, right? We'll show it to you. So it is harder for Canadian startups. And I had been told this kind of again and again, that it's harder for Canadian startups to find US VC investors that will kind of, value you or want to invest in you. And there's some, but it's harder. So we wind up exploring that route quite a bit. And even with our results, we kind of wind up angel rounds. I think we've done 6 rounds. So through kind of the network, and then we landed with, really focusing on the institutional investors in Canada, really are the ones that wind up on our short lists, and we mutually kind of, we're in the same space. So it's not easy, and you have to have velocities. You have to show that you're selling and you repeat selling, and the bar is pretty high. When you have the checklist with Arlene's incubator, one of the presentations was the checklist, right? The Ps and the VCs would come in and say, these are kind of the 10 things we look for. So you'll quickly figure that out. The CEO, the management team, the brand proposition, the price value, the gross margin, you go through the list. But most importantly is, how are you selling where you are on the shelf, or e-com, if you're an e-com business.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think we hear so much about how US companies get VCs as an example and skip over the actual practicalities, and Canada's different.
Yeah, it's just like, my goodness, like the same idea in the US, boom, I would have got 2 million right up front.
Right.
I barely got, under 400,000, 10,000 on a shot, and the same idea. And I was just like, man, what the heck? This brand, 2 million, 2 million, 2.5 million, 2 million. And I'm like, oh, goodness. So it's tough, but yeah. Thankfully there's a few more kind of, institutionals and startup funds and support that are helping. But if you don't, you have to put in your own money, you kind of have to, and then you have to get angels.
Yeah. It's that having that little bit of skin in the game up front, it does make a difference for how it looks to people, for the optics of it, if nothing else, sure. Right? Yeah. So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Before we wrap up, I want to ask, is there anything that, we have a listener community of entrepreneurs, a viewer community of entrepreneurs, is there anything that you want to leave them with, or any advice that you would give anyone sort of starting out or who feels stuck in this journey maybe?
Yeah, I would think the biggest gift is the networking. And it's, again, something I undervalued. And now I'm, that I've been exposed to so many other CEOs and so many startups again and again, I'm getting, we have a group of female founders, and we're all on email, and we're connecting, with dinners and Zoom and get-togethers. But I would really prioritize kind of leaning on others also to kind of build your network, because what happens in your journey is you're going to need this, and you're going to need that, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need that. So you may not think right today you need a COO, or you need kind of a referral for a digital company. Like today, you're like, oh, no, I don't need that right now, because today I'm focused on whatever these things are today that I'm solving. But you're going to need the village, the community. And try to make sure you spend, an hour a day was what the old days, when you were kind of trying to prioritize stuff, like an hour a day on that community, because you don't know what you don't know, but that you're going to need support. So make sure you join Mars and join all of the, whatever the startups are. I think they've changed a bit, and look at that and spend time on that, and then network and try to kind of say, okay, like I want to kind of build real authentic connections, even though right now there's not an immediate need, but I'm in this entrepreneur community. And the other reason I think that's really important is I felt kind of misunderstood earlier on. Like you're like a fish out of water, right? Like I'm networking with 200 blue suits, highly career successful, uber accomplished executives that were like, 3 levels higher than I ever was. And then it's me who's an entrepreneur. And you suddenly have, an hour conversation with Arlene, who's like a DNA entrepreneur. And you're like, oh, right. Like you feel understood in a world of entrepreneur, because it is a different world. And I think you have to So by focusing on the networking and on other kind of CEOs and founders and startups, you're going to get resources that you are going to need, and you're going to get a better sense of being understood and relating to the unique challenges of being a CEO of a startup. So
I think for any entrepreneurs, whether you are a startup, whether you are a service-based business, whatever sort of world you're in as an entrepreneur, I think that is incredibly valuable advice. And I appreciate you bringing it up again, because we don't, I think we look so often to shortcut the networking, or don't know where to start with it, or whatever the case may be. Just start. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Start.
I love that. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, Suzie. You can find Suzie online. Her company is www.lovegoodfats.ca, and there'll be links to that under this. And, I'm not part of the company, but I highly recommend you do try the bars, because they are delicious.
Great. And we launched shakes too, and we're just launched 3 new chewy nutties. So there's 12 different bars and 2 shakes and lots of options.
Amazing. Everyone should definitely check them out. Thanks, Suzie.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by eBay Canada. eBay Canada is here to help. They've been supporting Canadian small business retailers for 25 years, and their up-and-running program is getting Canadian businesses online today. Visit ebay.ca/up-and-running. Stay local and sell global with eBay.